This video, we are going to looking at some of the worst blown leads in the NFL. And of course, we can't start this video without talking about the NFC Championship, Lions versus Niners. The Lions had a 24-7 lead in halftime, let the Niners score 27 consecutive points to put them down 10, and then they obviously choked away the game from there. However, that wasn't the worst blown lead, because even though it's 17 points, you'll see that in a lot of cases, teams can blow these leads extremely late in the game. I'll give you a good example of that. Vikings versus Bengals. Vikings versus Bengals, you had the Vikings and Bengals both needing a win to stay in the playoff hunt. They actually, neither of them made the playoffs, and it was a messy game. But to start off the fourth quarter, the Vikings had a 17-3 lead. The game got knotted up at 24, and then the Bengals got a field goal to win 27-24 against Minnesota. Titans versus Dolphins, where the Titans had less than 3 minutes left, trailing by 15, and they still beat the Dolphins. They were actually winning 13-10 into the fourth quarter. The Dolphins pulled away with a 27-13 lead with less than 5 minutes left. That was not enough for them to win, and they took advantage of that strategy of going for two, down 14, which is a strategy that's beginning to actually gain traction now in the NFL, because the argument is that if you get it, then a single touchdown and you get the win. So in both cases, these teams are able to score back-to-back touchdowns within a minute. It was a very hyperactive period of the game. And the game actually was historical in several methods. There were legitimate records broken in a Titans versus Dolphins game. And that is, again, another horrible blown lead. Saints versus Packers is actually going to be another big blown lead. The Saints have a 17-0 lead at halftime, and the Packers win 18-17. They even have a 17-0 lead at the end of the third quarter because it remained scoreless. So the Packers had to get 18 unanswered points in the fourth quarter. And again, another win for the analytics, because the 2-point conversion was successful and it was instrumental in them winning and not having to face overtime. Speaking of which, the Giants might have had a horrible season, but they made their biggest comeback in team history. They were trailing 20-0 at the half, and more importantly, 28-7 midway through the third quarter, and it was still able to pull out the win following 3 touchdowns and a field goal. So again, a big comeback for the Giants in that regards. That might have been the biggest comeback of 2023. There were a lot of times that a team attempted a comeback and then failed. Like a failed comeback. Sometimes they are trailing big and tied up right into OT or at the end of the fourth quarter, only for the team to then be able to pull away with it. Jets Chiefs is an example of that. So is Rams Colts. Those are both big examples of a team, nearly blowing the lead. So those are both big examples. Now we can look at biggest blown leads of 2023 and get some more insight. Now the Cardinals have the most blown leads at 10 and the most blown fourth quarter leads at 3. Obviously, it's no surprise to see the Falcons so high on this list. The Eagles, they only had 4 blown leads and only 3 blown fourth quarter leads. The difference for the Eagles was, though, for the Eagles, you got to understand the fact that that a lot of times when they've blown a lead, it was number one against a terrible team, and number two, it was a big 2-possession lead. The Niners is the only case where the Eagles only held a 1-possession lead before blowing it, and of course that was blown in catastrophic fashion. Another case that I actually find particularly striking is Raiders versus Chiefs in that game. This game particularly. What I find so striking about that game is that the Raiders had a 14-0 lead, and they had already blown that lead by halftime. It was tied at 14 with the Chiefs getting the ball to start the second half. And from there, the Chiefs ran away to win 31-17. I mean, like, that is a catastrophically blown lead, I feel like. Also, speaking of 20-7, we have Bears versus Broncos in what was the worst game of the NFL in week 4. And the Broncos down 20-7 were able to win the game. Speaking of Broncos and comebacks against the Commanders, they actually blew a 21-3 lead. Where again, you had a 2-point conversion that was necessary so that a field goal would and 2 touchdowns would bring it to a 15-point game. Then the Commanders held a 35-24 lead that the Broncos nearly were able to force overtime from. Again, it all came from that failed 2-point conversion. Also, Bills versus Eagles is another huge comeback, and this time it was in Philly's favor because at the end of the fourth quarter, the Bills had a 24-14 lead. The Eagles were able to then take the lead going up 20-24. Bills got a touchdown, but then Jake Elliott makes a 59-yard field goal to tie the game into overtime. And then even though they're trailing in overtime 34-31, they win 37-34 off a Jalen Hurts rushing touchdown. So, is this a No, this isn't a field goal. I actually do want to show the field goal because I think it's insane. Keep in mind the conditions that this field goal is taking place in it. The temperatures were in the 40s. There was pouring rain, high wind. There was a storm in Philadelphia. Normally, 59-yard kicks like this can only be done in good weather. But look at how shocked the announcers are, too. Yeah. Yeah, that was a huge, huge, huge kick. Oh, and finally, Packers versus Falcons is the final game that I want to show you. Of this in this blown leads category. The Packers are 24-12 and they still blow the lead anyway.